prior to my salvation, a lot of craziness in certain years of my life, obviously. But I grew up in a home where there was no father. That was one of the factors that played a lot into my decisions and bad decisions, because there was no one to restrain me. And so my father, I guess, left when I was 6 years old. Me, my two younger sisters, and my youngest brother never knew what it was like to have a father. So factor that into growing up where you're basically a latchkey kid, and growing up I began to dabble with things that I shouldn't have been dabbling with. I started viewing things and I shouldn't be viewing for a young kid, which opened a door of darkness in my life and led me deeper into my own personal struggle with those kind of things. Then started smoking cigarettes, I think, with some friends, and one thing led to another. Started drinking. I remember going to school drunk, picking fights with people because the alcohol made you feel bigger and badder than you really were. And so I think it was because I had anger issues, not having a father, but I didn't really know at the time that that's what it was from. And so one thing led to another. I became, actually, by the time I was in junior high and high school, I was already, by my friends considered a, alcoholic. I'd go to parties and drink till I passed out. And, this was a regular thing. And, I was doing, you name it, in high school. I was already smoking weed and doing acid and methamphetamines and all these kind of things. But part of me did not like that. I wanted to change. And so at 17 years old, I got my mother to sign a permit for me to join the Marine Corps, because I figured, one, I wanted to be in the Marine Corps. I figured, I can make a name for myself, because my mom, she used to say things, and others used to say things about, you're just like your dad. And so, which affected me. And it was always in the bad moments of my life when, I was passed out, I was in jail, I was in trouble. So everything about me at that time wanted to change that. So I figured, well, I'll join Marine Corps. That'll help me change, And so you could take the guy out of the jungle, but you can't take the jungle out of the guy, so to speak. And so I went there. I was still the same person, still bound in sin, still bound in hatred. Even in the Marine Corps, I was always in fights, always drinking. It escalated, actually, because there was, at 18 you can drink there legally on base. And so, and I kept doing drugs and all these things, and eventually my career was shortened because of it. And so came back at almost 20 years old, and I just went downward from there. Went right back to what I was doing, dealing drugs. I worked construction, and when I wasn't working, I was dealing drugs on the side, and basically dealing to keep my habit. I hated methamphetamines, but I hated the way it ate my body up, made me feel, but I would just do it because I liked being high and drunk. And so I was able to go for a long time on drugs while I was on speed. And so, I got into all kinds of, fights. I remember one time I was at a bar. I walked in, and there's 3 homeboys in there, and I just walked up to them and said, hey, you and you, let's go outside and let's see what happens, And fortunately, they didn't take me up on it. Who knows? I might have been dead because of that. Other times, I remember one time because of a meth deal. This is actually across the street from where the Fontana Church used to be. I actually stopped while I was preaching, and I told them, I says, right across the street, because some guy was on meth, we were all on meth, and this guy pulled a gun on me, about as close as I am to you, maybe even closer, and was going to shoot me. And I remember thinking in my head, because of how stupid I was, go ahead and pull the trigger, dude, because I'm going to come back and get you. I really thought I was bigger than a bullet, and thought I was going to be able to survive it somehow. Escalate that, kept going, just my whole life was getting darker, and, I got tired of putting up the front, of trying to be violent, and I realized that why I was like this is because I was basically excuse me, I was a lonely man, full of hate and no answers. And so I remember I walked into a bar one night, my normal thing, and I went there and I said, I'm just gonna drink this away because that's what I thought I could do. When then I remember going right to the bartender, sitting down at the bar like I always did. And they all knew me in that particular bar there in Fontana. And I says, well, just give me a shot of tequila, followed up with a Budweiser, another shot of tequila, followed with another Budweiser. Did it like 3 times. And then just kept sucking beers down until I don't know what hour of the night, and I just could not get happy. And so I was like, man, I'm sick of this. And so I decided to walk home, so I wouldn't get a drunk driving that night. So I'm walking, and I wasn't a religious person. I didn't grow up in church, had no Bible background whatsoever, and so I didn't know where to turn. So I figured there was a God in heaven somewhere. I remember looking to the stars. I says, as I'm walking, I'm like, man, God, if you're real, I'm sick of this. I was 24 years old with nothing. I was tired of the, like I said, tired of putting up the fronts, I said, God, if you're real, I said, I need to change somehow. So I don't know what to do. And so I'm making a bargain with this God in heaven that I don't know. I says, I don't know what it is. I says, maybe I just I don't know what to do. I said, I'm sick of getting in fights when I don't want to get in fights anymore. I'm sick of the front that I've created, that I've got to constantly, act like I'm all this when, I'm just broken. And I said, maybe I'll start going to church. I said, maybe God, you'd give me a woman. Because I didn't think that was the answer, but I was thinking, man, something to mellow me out and chill me out. So I didn't know that, God heard that prayer. It wasn't but a couple, I don't remember, maybe 3-4 months later, 5 months later maybe, I met this girl who's now my wife. And it was like God orchestrated 2 broken people. She was a backslider. She was had her own past. And she was tired, and she was, lonely just like I was. And so we kind of connected. We partied together, eventually moved in together. And actually it was Valerie who witnessed to me for the first time. And so one particular night she's talking to me. She's got her Bible open and she's preaching to me about, Jesus and him needing to save me and everything else. And I had no clue what she was talking about. And I remember calling her a hypocrite. I said, look at you, you're preaching to me and you're doing everything I do. So, basically I was kind of telling her, be quiet in a sense. And so she was persistent, finally got me to actually say a sinner's prayer. And so she led me in the sinner's prayer, according to what she remembered as a little girl. Got to a point where she said, now say in Jesus' name. And I was so bound in darkness, I couldn't utter the name Jesus. I couldn't say it. I couldn't open my mouth. There was something in me that was keeping me from saying that name. And then I remember she was kind of freaking out. Freaking out like what's in this dude, And I remember in my own head seeing the images of 666. I used to be listen to a lot of dark music and things like this, and how it I guess affected me. And so I finally said Jesus, and something snapped. I got up and I picked up her Bible, walked away into a room, sat there for about an hour, maybe 2 hours. I was reading the Bible, and for the first time in my life, God's word became real to me, started speaking to me. So I came out of that room, and immediately I began to preach to her. I said, I told her, I said, we're not going to have no more sex, so we got to go to church. And that prayer just said, you need to pray it too. She got all upset with me because, she thought, I guess at the time she was better than I was. But anyways, because we had no foundation, we had no church, it kind of just dissipated. And then things began to escalate as far as the struggle in our own lives spiritually. We were both getting, mad at each other. I was hearing voices, demonic voices. I was paranoid because of all the drugs and all kinds of things. And I remember my sister came over after Sunday service who had gotten saved here at the door. And she began to invite both my wife and my girlfriend and I. And Valerie was pretty excited about it because she hadn't heard about anybody being born again in a long time. So she was all interested in me. I was like, I had no clue what she was talking about. And so I'm listening to all this, invitation. She was going to ask me if I was going to go to church. I said, I guess so. So I got ready best way I knew how. I figured I didn't want to fall asleep in church. So I went and did a line of meth before I went to church. I said, well, I don't want to fall asleep, And then once I did that line, I started to tweak out again a little bit. My heart rate went up. I started yelling, man, I don't want to go to church like this. So I smoked a joint so I could mellow out. And I went to the fridge like I always did and drank a beer. So all right, I'm ready to go. So I went to church just like, just the way I was. Had my flip-flops on, my shorts, my Corona t-shirt, I'll never forget. My marijuana earring in my ear. And there we sat in that church service. And so I remember Valerie, as we're sitting there in the song service, she's all, crying during the song service. And so I didn't know what she was going through, And so, sensitive as I was at the time, I asked her, what is your trip? I brought you to church. Why are you crying? And she made this statement, which I think rings loud in every backslider's heart. She says, this is something I always wanted. I didn't understand. She told me later she felt like she was in prison. And so we sat through the movie, and it was probably the dumbest Christian movie I've ever seen in my life as a Christian. Made no sense to me. It was all people were talking about how they used to do drugs and they didn't do drugs anymore. I'm sitting in the church. I've got drugs in my pocket. I got weed and I got speed on me. And I'm thinking, I can probably tell all these people about drugs. I got a bunch at home. And so it made no sense to me. And then the altar call came, which I didn't know what that was at the time. As they were pulling for people to get saved, something in me just didn't want to do it. My pride, my sin, whatever it was. I said, no, later for this, I'm not going to pray. So I went to the back of the church, back wall, and this guy named Vato, that's what they called him, come walking up to me, with his cholo stride. And he said, hey, man, you ever hear about Jesus? And in church, I told him, F you, dude. I don't need you. God, I don't need nothing. He kind of went and sat back down, and then Ron Tucci came over a few minutes later, and I knew Ron's older brother, Anthony, from school, and so they looked, if you know any of the Tucci, they all kind of look alike. And so I wasn't as rude to him. And so I listened to what he had to say, but I told him I didn't want to pray. And then right around that moment, pastor was still preaching and pulling the altar going. He says, if you're here, God brought you here, wants to do something in your life. And the Holy Ghost brought conviction. It's like God was speaking to me, and I was looking. I said, man. And instantly, I don't know how long it took, but I'm in church. I don't go to church. I don't know anybody in this church other than my sister and my girlfriend. I says, maybe God is trying to get a hold of me. And so I think Ron had walked away. I walked up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, man, I'll pray with you. So I don't know how to pray. And so I went to the altar, and he led me in a prayer, a sinner's prayer. And it was a glorious, ugly salvation where, everything, all the hate and everything came out. And I was feeling clean. I was feeling, happy. And they asked if anyone wanted to get delivered. I didn't understand what that was at the time. I didn't speak Christianese. I didn't know all the jargon, And so I think I asked Ron, what are you talking about? He goes, you want to stop doing drugs? I remember telling him, yeah, I want to stop. I hate speed, man. I've been doing it forever. And so we all stood up. I don't know, maybe 8, 10 of us, maybe more. And pastors began to pray for people, and I don't know what happened, but when he came to me, when he laid his hand on my head, his hand got real big because it knocked me to the ground. And my first response was to clench my fist and look around to hit somebody, because I'm thinking, who pushed me? Who pushed me right now? And then Ron was there. He says, man, God just touched your life. So I don't know, man. I was smiling like a smashed cat and looking around like, man, what the heck just happened? And so I got up. We're all there. We're all on the ground that night. I said, man, something just happened. I remember asking people around me, I said, you guys got church tomorrow? And because I wanted to come back. So before Valerie and I, we left, walking out over by the parking lot. Before I got to the car, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my bag of weed, and I threw it in the parking lot, and reached into my wallet, pulled out my bag of speed. Valerie looked at me, she said, didn't know I had it on me. She goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm tossing this. So we tossed that, head on the freeway, went to Montana, got into the house. I remember going to the room, taking all my meth that I had, all the paraphernalia, putting it in the toilet, flushing it, tossing my scale into the trash can, all my drugs, bogs, pipes, you name it, everything I had to do with it, I broke it and tossed it. And me and her, I went from the bedroom to the couch. We decided to live clean. Nobody even told us. We just, hey man, we got to do this right. And eventually moved in with John Jurenick, had an apartment, so moved in with him. And, a year later, began to date my wife, and a year after that, got married. Raised 5 kids in church. I'm a grandpa and a preacher. What else you want? That it? I'm good.